tonight we are going to talk about a film that is it's going to premiere, I believe, in Chicago at the Music Box Theater.
Right.
It is called Color Out of Space, or as you put it in your message to me, Color Out of Shape. I don't know if that was a typo or your thoughts on the movie.
It could be a proper name for it as well, I suppose.
Indeed. So yeah, if it's January, there's a Nicolas Cage movie out, as I say. Or it's kind of getting to the point where if it's a month, if it's just a month of the year, there's a Nicolas Cage movie coming out. I think he's still paying off the IRS or something. He's this is the rare new film of his that's getting released in a theater, which is kind of nice to see.
I think there's a reason for that. This is different than your typical VOD Nicolas Cage movie. In fact, there's probably a VOD Nicolas Cage movie in January that we don't even know about.
We could talk to Patrick Bromley about that. He said, I think it's one of his resolutions, he's going to watch all of the direct-to-video Nicolas Cage movies as like a quest.
Glutton for punishment he is.
Yeah.
I know Nathan Rabin and Clint Worthington are doing this whole thing where they're taking a Travolta film and taking a Nick Cage film. More Glutton's punishment. And the reason I said this is a different thing is because this is Richard Kelly's long-awaited. I'm Richard Stanley. Sorry.
Yeah, I was
Richard Kelly's a different story. Richard Stanley's long-awaited return as a director. Very interesting writer-director. I first came into contact with his work back when I was in college. We rented Hardware from 1990, and it's still a movie that I want you and I to see and talk about. And I'll lend you the Blu-ray that came out last year. It's an interesting movie, and he really struck me as a very interesting director. But then he went and did all these kind of weird, seldom seen, very, different type of almost experimental type films. And then The Island of Dr. Moreau, 1996, with Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando, which deserved its own documentary, which is exactly what it got. When I think in 2014, Lost Soul: The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau. You've heard of documentaries about movies that never got made.
Oh, yeah.
Well, here's this documentary about a movie that was very problematic, that probably shouldn't have gotten made, that was kind of a train wreck, yet such a very, very interesting train wreck. So now we have this, and apparently he's been working on this for years, or wanting to get this off the ground for years. He's a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and this is based off, I think, a short, right?
I don't know. I've not read the story that it was based on. In fact, I didn't know it was based on a Lovecraft story until that. I think the opening credits said based on. I've not read a lot of Lovecraft. In fact, I don't know that I've read Eddie Lovecraft all the way through. But we'll get into it. But I'm definitely interested in Lovecraft, and he's been referenced and aped for throughout the century.
Cthulhu and all that jazz. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely am with you. I've been eyeballing the big old thick hardcover Barnes and Noble H.P. Lovecraft type thing, and I just imagine myself sitting in my green chair with a blanket and warm socks, and maybe I don't have a fireplace, but at least my dog could look at me longingly while I'm home alone some Sunday afternoon during a snowstorm or rain, and watch. Hopefully there's thunder involved, and read some H.P. Lovecraft. That would be great.
You left out the pipe, the smoking jacket, and the brandy.
Yeah, I would give it a couple short stories, and then maybe I'll get into that.
Okay.
So I that's why I think this is kind of different, is because if it wasn't for kind of the return of Richard Stanley and a movie based off a short story, a Lovecraft story, that this wouldn't be just your average run-of-the-mill, VOD Nick Cage movie. It does, not too surprisingly, as far as if we could go with, if you want to call it a Cage-o-meter or a Cage radar or whatever, Cage gauge. There we go.
I was gonna say it, and then you said it for me.
No, and I read your mind. Thank you, Skype. Yeah, if we could do a Cage gauge, I mean, I think this is somewhere along the realm of, say, Mom and Dad and Mandy, somewhere around there. Or how are we going to explain this story? Yeah, by all means.
It's Annihilation meets The Thing meets every early Spielberg meets Nicolas Cage not really giving a shit. And then it ends.
I'm interested in the every early Spielberg. Can you expand on that?
I mean, mostly the aesthetics. You've got the big sweeping lights and that kind of weird lens flare thing. You've got the kid who's wandering outside looking after the lights. I mean, this movie could not be more Close Encounters if it wanted to be. Let's just jump to the shit. I'm not a fan of this movie. The Spielbergian stuff and all the bits that I just kind of alluded to wouldn't bother me as much if I felt like the movie knew what the hell it wanted to be. And I think part of the problem is Nicolas Cage. I was thinking if you had an actor in there who was not hamming it up and going crazy all of the time throughout this thing, it would have worked much better, because he's an actor who has had serious roles and then kind of goes off the deep end. But I think in later years, he just starts off the deep end and then just plunges further. So I can't really take him seriously anymore.
It is really weird. Yeah, no, I get it. I share your frustration. I wanted to like this movie on an aesthetic level and as a concept a lot more than I actually wound up liking it. There's some interesting things happening here, folks. I mean, you have Cage with alpacas. You have Cage with a lot of pink around him. You have Cage in a shower. Well, not full, but Jolie Richardson.
With a morbid breast cancer storyline.
Vague.
Again, Nicolas Cage is not the person to be in this part.
It is weird. I mean,
you'll always be my golden girl.
So it starts off. Let's just start with the opening. It's in this. There's this lake, and on the shore of the lake is this young teenage girl doing some kind of a witchcraft ritual. Ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And she's really into it. She's summoning something, or trying to reach out to something. I think she's maybe wishing that her mother's totally clear of cancer and hoping that some kind of spell that she casts will help that situation. And then this guy just kind of walks down a path towards the lake right behind her. And it's the first of many times when in the film, whenever we see this guy, he's always saying what his job title is, which is a hydrologist.
Yes. Maybe he just has to tell people over and over again because he doesn't quite believe it himself.
Now, if I was a hydrologist, maybe. If I was a hydrologist, and he's walking around with this like messenger bag kind of thing, and if I was a hydrologist walking around in the sticks, as Nicolas Cage calls it eventually, and I happened upon a young teenage girl doing a ritual, I would probably turn the other way. Also, if I'm walking around this area and I'm testing like water, is it water levels or what is he doing?
Yeah, I think he's testing for. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but it looks like he's testing for contamination and probably.
Right.
I think he's just doing some kind of a general survey, and then things start getting weird, so he has to do other things.
So here's the thing, because I'm a considerate guy, what I would do in his position, I'd walk around, talk to people about, hey, the water could be contaminated. Here's some bottled water. Keep it on you, right? You never know. Because you're in the sticks, right?
Well, that's the first of many problems with the film, in which, and that's the other frustrating. There's so much frustrating stuff going on here. Most of which is there's a lot of unnatural behavior on the part of the characters that transcends bad horror movie / monster movie behavior. There's always the don't run upstairs kind of a thing, or don't answer the door, and also just people acting strange because something strange is affecting them. There's an alien meteorite that lands, and this weird glowing light / mist / smell comes out that starts affecting people oddly.
Or at least Nick Cage, yeah.
Well, yes, but
because he's the only one who smells it, apparently.
Yes, and that's why there's sort of a mystery to this thing as to, is everybody experiencing this alien kind of invasion, if you want to call it that, differently, which is kind of interesting. Is almost like if everyone's having their own independent acid trips. Right. But the film never really establishes what's going on. I think it gets confusing because there's an idea of evil in terms of like the Lovecraftian monsters that we encounter, these interdimensional demon overlords or something. Or are they just aliens that, they colonize planets and take over like a virus, that there's nothing necessarily sentient or malicious about them? Mm-hmm. We do get a glimpse of their, in sort of not exactly a flashback, but Ward Phillips is the name of our hydrologist. He, at one point in the movie, gets a psychic flash of the alien homeworld, or what we're meant to believe in it. Looks almost like there may be some kind of technology or hierarchy to it. It's kind of fuzzy.
Is that toward the end of the movie?
Yes. When he touches the girl during the whole big... Oh, by the way, we're just going to talk spoilers here.
Yeah. Okay. I thought he was just tripping out, but all right.
To me, it just felt kind of like... you remember that moment in Independence Day when the Dr. Oaken goes up to the glass and the thing puts his arm around him and kind of explains everything?
Gotcha.
It's kind of like that. But I can't...
Excuse me, I was yawning there.
I know this is long-winded. I apologize.
No.
But
it's you explaining the movie and me reliving it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is like all of this weird stuff that's going on. I still can't excuse the dumb decision these people make. Like when this meteorite lands, this happens, at bedtime. So I'll be generous and say it's 11 o'clock. Like the little boy is still up, who for the first half hour, I swear it was an unbilled Jacob Tremblay. I didn't know how that was going on. But so they don't report this meteorite until the next morning. Like 8 hours have passed. And then they get the mayor and the sheriff to come out to investigate this rock. And when they come out to investigate the rock, the teenage boy is poking at it with a stick. And all of this nonsense, and at no point and the hydrologist wanders up and he's like, hey, what's this weird thing? At no point is anyone freaking out and saying, okay, we gotta call the feds, stop touching that, we're quarantining this entire area. It's as if someone found a dead dog in the road. The mayor comes up, she's utterly unconcerned, and there's almost like this weird, she keeps popping up like on the news and stuff, as if it's some kind of a conspiracy subplot that never goes anywhere.
And there's this weird like backstory tension, like she said kind of flippantly, you should have sold the house to me. And what? I mean, the thing is, like, I guess that house used to be his father's. And as we learn, as the film unfolds vaguely, we learn that he had a weird relationship with his father, or not a very functional one. And his wife, I'm not quite sure what she does for a living, but it needs Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and she's hemorrhaging clients. You don't understand. She's hemorrhaging clients because she can't get the internet to work.
Well, they are in the sticks.
Sure, but Tommy Chong is living in a shack behind their house with using solar panels, and everything is fully powered.
Right.
And
he's got better Wi-Fi.
Seriously, she should just move in back there. And then, okay, so Ward Phillips talks about, where's he getting all this juice? Oh, it's from solar panels. So we're meant to believe that there's no signal, no electricity or anything out there. Yet we cut to about the middle of the film. He's got this whole, like, government issue tent set up for his hydrology work. And it's like this elaborate thing. Like, did he put this all together? Is he really out there all by himself? These are questions I need answers to. I don't need to know about Nicolas Cage's bad history with his dad. I need to know who this Ward Phillips kid is and what he's doing out there. Don't get me wrong. I think the actor who plays him, Elliot Knight, and the actress who plays Lavinia, who's the teenage girl who's into the witchcraft or whatever,
right.
Her name's Madeline Arthur. I thought they were two of the best things in the movie. And I think if they'd had a different lead who could kind of back up their sincere efforts to make this a real movie, then it would have been something worth, really worth praising.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked, I don't know, maybe somebody like Ed Harris or something, I don't know, Viggo Mortensen or something. But I'm wondering what kind of character this would be, this Nathan Gardner character. If it wasn't, I guess my question is, how much did the casting have an effect on the characterization? Because I know that Richard Stanley wanted to work with Cage for a long time. His favorite Cage movie is Vampire's Kiss.
That explains a lot.
Exactly. And I think he even mentioned, at least it says in the trivia, that he even mentioned to Cage, I want you to basically to act like that. It's like, no. Okay, no. I would have backed out of that, as soon as I heard that. There's just it. At first, it's Cage playing, basically kind of a somewhat aloof, kind of caring dad, of 3 kids, 2 teenagers and a young boy, kind of getting over, his wife probably is in remission from cancer or had surgery 6 months ago or something like that. And yeah, of course, there's this scene when this meteor happens. There's a scene where, like, maybe they're finally having sex for the first time after the surgery, and the camera goes to, like, what they're doing in their bedroom, what the little boy's doing in his bedroom. He's freaking out because he sees this light, and the dog's freaking out. Anytime a dog freaks out in a horror movie, it's like, come on, listen to the dog, unless it's John Carpenter's The Thing. But and then the other 2 teenagers who are kind of, the teenage boy is like, immersed in his I guess his video game.
He's doing something on the computer.
Yeah, PC video game, and then she's kind of still kind of into. She's got her witchcraft handbook. Is it Necronomicon or whatever?
The Necronomicon, yeah.
I can never pronounce it. Yeah, so it's a family that needs some help, as it is.
Well, right, but again, going back to this unexplained behavior, this light/meteor thing hits, and the little boy and the dog are very much in tune to it. But Nicolas Cage and Jolie Richardson are upstairs fooling around. It's arguable that, like, they're in a completely blacked out bedroom, right? So you can't really see what's going. It kind of like phases, goes by the window. But the teenage boy, the light is practically in his room, and he's ignoring it. I'm like, okay, again, is this a perception thing? We learn later that time, this phenomenon or creature or whatever affects time as well as space. But I know I'm constantly saying I don't necessarily need an explanation for everything. But when logic just seems to fly out the window at every given turn in the movie, damn it, I need to rewind and get a little bit of, backstory here.
Yeah, something has to ground us.
Yeah, and there's none of that. I mean, later, Benny, the teenage boy, he climbs down into a well because he thinks he sees his missing dog down there. And, of course, he finds out too late that the only thing down there is the deadlights from Stephen King's It. It comes up.
The pink deadlights.
Yeah, you mentioned John Carpenter's The Thing. Of course, His family raises alpacas. At one point, Nicolas Cage goes into the barn and he finds all the alpacas strung together in this giant multi-headed hydra thing that John
What did you think
Carpenter,
of? Yeah.
he's probably filing a lawsuit right now if he's not too stoned.
It looked like a cross between something that a predator would skin alive, or the dogs from the thing.
And I understand people pay homage to other movies all the time, but when you've got something that's as iconic as the dog scene from The Thing, you kind of have to really bring something new to it instead of just remaking it. Except this takes place on a farm instead of an Antarctic, government station.
And it's a weird farm too, because it's a farmhouse supposedly, but it's pretty much deep in the woods. There's no like farm land. I couldn't tell like what he's growing. Of course, there's this one scene where he's like out in the back, like picking tomatoes and peaches, and that's followed by a even more interesting scene when he's somewhat checking the fruit and cleaning them in front of the kitchen sink.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to take a bite out of them, and he spits it out, and then, yeah, he just goes all Cage on that.
Well, you mentioned Clint Worthington's challenge about the Travolta and Nick Cage movies. He comes very close to directly referencing Face Off when his character says, "I could eat a peach for hours." It's just I don't know what's going on with this movie. It's very bizarre, but. Yeah, so he's picking this mutated fruit. By this time, he's gone around the bend, because any sane person picks up a tomato that's almost the size of his head and said, I probably shouldn't put this in my mouth, much less bring it in the house. But there's all sorts of weird vegetation going on, which brought me back to Annihilation, another film in which there's this rainbowy, glittery kind of field that's creating all of this strange wildlife. Right. It's causing bodies to meld with each other, and I have to put up the disclaimer that because I haven't read the Lovecraft story, or I know just enough about Lovecraft to know that a couple of the neighboring towns that were referenced during the weather report, Innsmouth and Dunwich, are from other Lovecraft stories.
Okay.
But it's entirely possible that the multi-headed hydra dog and this vegetation and all this stuff, those aren't references to Annihilation of The Thing. Those may be references to Lovecraft, because this is pulled from an old story. Maybe John Carpenter and the people who've made movies about them are ripping that off, and this movie is just unfortunately paying homage to something that's been ripped off so many times. But as an audience member, I'm still picking up on it because I'm a fan of the genre.
Right. Yeah, and there are moments where we see how limited the budget is here. Some of these mutated creatures that had come into contact with this pink color wave thing. We see that they're kind of interesting. We see that winged insect with all these eyes, and that's interesting. Nothing ever comes of that. It just shows up here and there.
It shows up at the very end, though, to show that the thing's not really dead.
Right.
Even though I don't know how it died in the first place. We'll have to get that in a minute.
Yeah. So there's that. And then what happens to the mom, Nick Cage's wife, and the youngest son is interesting at first. It's almost like this body meld. They become this hybrid thing. thing. And it's funny. It's like, let's take her to the couch. It's like they just leave her on the couch, and she's moaning and groaning and sweating and bubbling and growing tumors. And there was some image that was pretty cool there that made me think, this would be a better graphic novel or something, where it's like we see her kind of contorted and writhing and looking really sickly and terrible, and then she's covered in a blanket, but then we also see like the boy's hands also kind of draped over the couch and stuff. So it's like, gosh, I'm glad this thing is covered, because I'd be afraid to see what is happening underneath that blanket. But then eventually they're like, all right, let's take her to the attic. And my thing was, it's probably because it's darker and we could hide the poor CGI. And I think it seems like a lot of this is practical effects, at least some of it. But then when she becomes this bizarre, spider type creature, that's that's when Nick Cage like feeds his other daughter, the witchcraft daughter, to his wife and I guess Ursat's young son. That then it just becomes just too weird beyond mention. I don't know what's happening there. It would be interesting if this movie had something to say about family dysfunction, about manipulation, about insanity, something. But it really doesn't touch on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think because the drama of the mother of a family going through breast cancer is enough to, there have been movies made about that subject,
sure,
and to varying degrees of success. You could take something like that and look at what it really does to a family, and then throw in this alien element to really to push the boundaries of how that would affect people, mm-hmm. especially if this thing changed her in a way that was either very cruel in the sense that she's being put out of her misery, and it's sort of like the Pet Sematary remake where it just goes really dark and unnecessarily cruel, to be effective in that way, or to have some kind of a redemptive story, like maybe this thing is giving her some kind of like a new life or the ability to evolve into a higher organism that's better than what she had to experience. I'm not explaining this well, but there are other compelling avenues to go down besides just having the shock value of a mother and son melded together horribly and turning into a Hellraiser monster that then just the sheriff shows up and there's shotguns and all this craziness
with the hydrologist.
Yeah, with the hydrologist, sure.
Because he's everywhere.
He is. I'm starting to think that he was the guy who called the alien down to Earth.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. I mean, he bookends the movie, and I forgot till the end that he was narrating at the very beginning, so I guess it should be assumed that he survives. But at the end, when the house kind of explodes in on itself, and we have the Ghostbusters ending where there's just like white crap everywhere, there's people, he's slowly crawling out of the wreckage. I was just waiting for him to say, "I love this town." But no, we cut to however many months later, he's just walking around this dam talking about, well, it was contained, I guess, but something could still get out. And I honestly don't know what's going on. Why did the thing die?
Didn't he say something like, "I'm never going to drink out of this"? They've buried it under, how many feet of water, but I'm never going to drink out of here again. Who would drink out of a lake anyway?
The mayor, I don't know.
I mean, okay, there's water reclamation and everything, and I guess, we do drink out of Lake Michigan, but there's filters and everything, but anyway.
Yeah, it's just, it didn't, again, I don't understand why this thing blew up and froze and turned to ash or whatever. It just seemed like it had won until the point where it imploded on itself. And also, it seemed like it was spread far and wide enough. I mean, if this thing is carrying on the air in terms of scents and creating insects and flora and stuff, I don't know why that's contained to a particular blast zone. It just seems like it would have been carried, like during the couple of days that this all takes place, as this thing is expanding, its reach would be going far out of the impact zone, as it were.
Yeah, unless that just wasn't its goal.
Why does it have goals like this?
I don't know. I don't know. I just wish it was, maybe a little bit more trippy than it was vague, let's just say. And not necessarily another trippy Nick Cage performance, but more so of what was happening on screen. As far as this alien creature or something, I wish that it was I wish that the idea of this alien creature coming to Earth would have been more of like some kind of a study of humanity or something, and maybe it heightened, um, you know, anxiety or insanity or something, you know, in people, and it kind of flourished from that or something. But honestly, I feel like this was just. I'm very curious about the short story, because if I can, mainly because I'm really wondering how this Nathan Gardner character plays out in this short story, because it's got to be totally opposite of what Nick Cage is doing here or something, because it doesn't make sense what he's doing here. But
right, and I think that's where, you mentioned Viggo Mortensen. I think he would have been, really fun to watch in this part, because he's someone who can play an everyman, a family man, and I could also see him going off the deep end and getting really weird. And I think that's what this movie needed, is a period of transition. Instead, you get Nicolas Cage like getting into this really bad, almost a caricature accent of his own valley speak, and like cursing out his daughter, and saying they're alpacas. Like, what are you doing?
See, what I thought was happening when he first slipped into that accent, and the accent isn't always there. I thought he was channeling his dead father, and maybe this creature was affecting him in that way, and because it seemed at first like when he was mentioning his father on the back porch with his wife, when he was trying to give her a hickey or something, when he was mentioning his father with her, it seemed like he was slipping into this kind of like mocking accent that might have been his father's accent. I don't know. So later on, when he starts to go off the deep end, he slips into this. It's almost like a different character when he has that accent. So I was wondering if he was like playing the father, that his father was affecting him in some way and almost taking over or something. That would have been would be even more interesting. Like if this alien was affecting him and having him in that way, and having him kind of relive his father, become his father or something like that. That would have been interesting. But it's still so vague that we just think he's just going off the Cage deep end,
that consideration about the dad, and that's a question I think you could have asked Nick Cage from 25 years ago, when he was on the verge of winning the Oscar for Leaving Las Vegas, back when he was still a capital A actor. And this is not to denigrate him, because I think he is a very talented, one of the most talented actors of his generation. It's just that whatever has happened to him in the ensuing quarter century, I can't say with any certainty that he's even thinking that deeply about it. I feel like he's being hired, and just like you said when you were talking about the director's obsession with vampires, just like, oh, just give me that. And he's like, all right, I'll just pull up my Nick Cage number 37, and just tell me when to cut. And that's really unfortunate.
Agreed.
I think he sums it up. It's either Nathan Gardner or it's Ward Phillips, and I can't remember who said it, but they summed up my entire feeling about this film, describing the color out of space. It sucks and it burns.
I thought that too when I heard that line. I'm like, that's kind of this movie. One thing, whenever I hear a character in a movie utter my most eye-roll-inducing line, at least for me, pet peeve of mine, Tommy Chong's Ezra says, "You just don't get it, do you?" And whenever somebody says that, I'm like, really? Don't writers think about lines? And after a while, I started to count the number of times other characters would say, "It's going to be all right. You're going to be all right." Like 5 times. The mother cuts off her 2 fingers while cutting vegetables. Like, it's going to be all right. We're going to get to go to the hospital. Supposedly the hospital's an hour away. Okay, if anybody's cut off an appendage, you know that you need to get those fingertips back, stitch them back together, and time is of the essence, let's just say. But really, the kids are telling the parents are telling the kids, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. After a while, I'm like, if this was a drinking game, I'd be sloshed by now.
Well, yeah, and I think we're getting to the point now where it's early in the year, but I'd be willing to bet this could become a drinking game of characters chopping off their own fingers in horror movies. You didn't see the Grudge remake that came out a couple weeks ago, but there is a scene where Lynn Shaye's character is filmed from the back. She's in the kitchen chopping, I think, carrots, if I'm not mistaken, and all of a sudden, whoops, she's chopping off her own fingers. Spoilers for the Grudge that no one saw.
Original.
Yeah.
I'm still curious about that movie, mainly because of the cast.
Yeah. Just go watch Columbus again and anything else Lynn Shaye has been in, and save yourself the heartache.
Wait. Oh, because of John Cho?
Yeah.
Okay,
Columbus.
okay. I was Lynn Shaye was not in Columbus, but okay.
No. That's why any other Lynn Shaye picture, you'll get a better,
Gotcha. Basically, the Insidious movies. Okay, gotcha.
There you go. Yeah. So I don't know anything else to say about this movie. I just can't anymore.
I mean, it'll be really interesting to see. I'm actually surprised this isn't just going to like midnight status, like midnight film status automatically. I think, I'm pretty sure it premiered at Toronto. And I didn't hear too many good things about it. Yeah, it premiered at Toronto. And the Fantastic Fest. But it seems like it's, really wanting to be a kind of a cult classic, and I just don't think it's going to get that status. I mean, I mentioned movies like Mom and Dad and Mandy, just because they're bug nuts Cage movies. And I know you weren't totally crazy about Mom and Dad, but I would totally recommend, if you were at all amused about anything that Cage does here, then I would totally recommend. I would point people towards Mom and Dad, but and even Mandy, of course. But it's a weird Nicolas Cage time.
Yeah, I agree. I think of the three, this is definitely the weakest of the bunch. The problem is, it didn't have to be.
Right.
I think you're right on about this wanting to feel like a midnight movie. I think it's picking up on the popularity of Mandy, which also had this weird kind of an 80s vibe aesthetic, like a third generation hangover from Stranger Things. This movie, down to the font on the poster, to the look of the poster, it just screams trippy. It screams Fantastic Fest. But it's not stupid enough to be a midnight movie howler, and it's not serious enough to be serious science fiction. I think it's too derivative for the people who show up to a midnight screening. They've seen all the movies that this movie rips off, but doesn't add anything to that pantheon. So it's just kind of a mess.
Yeah, I mean, even the look at the poster, it looks like something that somebody created in a city college graphic arts class from 1991.
There you go. I did like at the very end how the credit screen dissolves into that trippy color and then almost appears to be a movie screen eating itself. That was kind of a nice touch. Other than that,
I there was that one scene though with I think when the Mom and Dad, not the movie, but when Cage and Richardson are driving back supposedly from the hospital. It's funny, we never go to the hospital went to see her get her fingers stitched back on, but when they drive back from the hospital, they run into what we think is Tommy Chong's cat. That was an interesting scene just because it almost reminded me of I don't know why, just like that not intentionally, I guess, but subconsciously it reminded me of the Large Marge scene from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Totally.
It was like, it was like, wait, let's rewind that. What is happening?
Well, also because it was telegraphed. I mean, like right before Tommy Chong's like, yeah, you'll run into my cat, but you probably won't recognize her. And then that's the next scene is them driving and then the cat's on the road. Again, the cat, didn't the cat, like, how far out did it get? Is it spreading its weird alien seed throughout the land?
Or the horse, for all that matters.
Or the horse, yes.
Yeah. And the thing is the way this pink alien thing affects creatures. I'm talking, animals and humans. It all affects them differently. Like, what it was doing to the young boy was very interesting, but I don't know what it was doing. It was almost like affecting the boy from the inside out, and it had this glowing presence underneath his skin, but that never amounted to really anything. And then we saw what it did to the alpacas, and we saw what it did to even the horse had a purple gleam in its eye. It's like, okay, so what is it doing?
Well, yeah, you bring up an excellent point, and I know we're just continuing to open up more layers on this onion, this rotten onion. But okay, you've got the creepy kid drawing motif where he's sitting there drawing pictures of the purple alien or whatever, and then when he's sitting at the well, like sitting in front of the well, and everyone just kind of like walks by and like, oh, that's kind of weird. Whatever. He's just talking to someone. He's like, yeah, I'm talking to the person in the well. They're telling me things. I'm like,
I'm talking to my friends.
Yeah, which another trope that we've seen usually in ghost movies and things.
Yeah.
But okay, so is this really communicating with them, or like I mentioned earlier, is this some kind of like an acid trip that is just messing with their brain? Like they're all stroking out on their own individual things, but collectively, I don't know.
And of course, they can't get out of there because there's the trope of the car doesn't work, right?
Look, even in like some Friday the 13th sequels, people just say, screw it, we're just going to walk. Like,
right.
They just try and leave. They don't need a horse. They don't need a car. They allegedly live in these woods. They can just walk on the main road. And they're like, oh, it's dark outside. I know it's dark outside. You have a flashlight. And there's alien goo transforming your parents. Just leave.
And it's funny, the hydrologist and the teen witch, at the end, they're like, so we're just going to walk? He was like, we're going to walk, isn't that 7 miles or something? And it's like, yeah, anywhere's better than here.
On top of that, he's been walking the entire movie, showing up everywhere.
He's like Johnny Appleseed with fresh water.
I mean, we even see at one point he has a Jeep outside that huge tent, but I don't think we ever see him drive it. He's on foot.
Why drive when everybody can give him rides? I mean, the sheriff's giving him rides, the mayor, whatever. It's like, jeez. I don't know. This is So this is you said it's coming out the music box, right?
Yeah.
It'll be in
tonight as we present this.
It'll be very interesting to see how it's received. I have a feeling like people will be coming to this out of curiosity for Richard Stanley, maybe curiosity for Lovecraft, and ironically for Nick Cage. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of a dangerous brew. I'm glad the music box has that bar now. But that's color out of space, or as you put it, color out of shape. And I think this is a misshapen movie that really could have been something, fun and or really deep, but it's just neither. Yeah. So with that, thank you. I'm going to go tend to my mutated peaches now, and I think that's it.
Yes, that is it. Be careful of those alpacas.
They're alpacas!
Put them in the barn!
No, just don't put them in the